All right, we're going to get started. Quick introduction. These are lightning lessons hosted by Maven. We've now hosted probably over 1,000 of them. I actually have no idea. But we do 30-minute, really tactical lessons that our instructors teach on all sorts of topics. And to spice things up every once in a while, I come in and I bring a special guest like Andrew Chen, and we do a 45-minute Q&A because we find when there's two people, it's just way too hard to do it in 30 minutes. And we want to make sure there's room for audience questions. So if you have questions along the way, if they're about what we're talking about right now, and it's just a clarification question, like you don't understand a term, you can put it in the chat. Otherwise, any question that's longer, that's more than a sentence, please put it in the Q&A section, and we'll go there. And yes, Andrew, you can plug your Substack, but also Rachel will plug your Substack twice during this session, as well as over email afterwards to everyone who signed up.
Nice. Nice. You guys are the best. Thank you.
So we are happy to do it. I've been, you know what's funny? I'm probably subscribed to like 50 email newsletters. I now have this like thing in my inbox that threads all of them in the same place. There are probably 2 or 3 that I read, and you are the longest standing email newsletter that I still read. Over 10 years, I've probably been reading your newsletter. Both Andrew and I were some of the early, we were kind of second wave growth hackers. We were the ones who made it popular, but there were people before us. So it's really fun to talk about growth in the AI era. And let's set the scene, Andrew. Can you tell us, and by the way, I'm not introducing Andrew too much, but I'll do a quick intro. He's a general partner in Andreessen Horowitz. He runs Speedrun. He invested in Maven, in Substack, and lots of other incredible companies. Now he writes one of the best newsletters on tech and growth. So start us off here, Andrew. We're in a pretty unique moment. The traditional growth playbooks feel like they're kind of breaking. Can you talk about that, and what do you think is going on right now?
Yeah, look, I mean, in the era where Gagan, you and I kind of grew up and people kind of invented and coined growth hacking and built the growth teams, and everyone got the whole industry got really smart about A/B testing and conversions and all that stuff. That was, I mean, it's amazing to think about, but that was over 10 years ago now. And I think that explosion of knowledge really came simultaneously with the rise of mobile, the rise of the Facebook platform, cloud computing, and all these kind of enabling technologies. And I think you often see that, which is kind of these tactics and strategies kind of go hand in hand with new technology explosions. And so what's happened is the iPhone was released in 2007, and so now we're 15 years in, and the question is, well, we're on Zoom, we're not in the metaverse wearing all wearing VR goggles, we're not watching the Zoom call on our on our smartwatches. There just hasn't really been this kind of new general purpose technology that's emerged in recent years. And what that just naturally means is all of these ideas and all of these strategies kind of get a little bit stale because everybody kind of absorbs them, everybody kind of uses them, everybody builds products that makes it really easy to understand your cohort retention, makes it really easy to generate ad creative, makes it really easy to calculate your CAC LTV. And so a lot of that, sort of the advantages in marketing and growth kind of get arbitraged away over time. And so then everybody kind of like has the same tools. And so, what's really interesting about AI and, this topic that we're going to jump into is it's maybe, and I really think it's a maybe that this will kind of put the shot in the arm in this new generation of growth and marketing. But there's a lot of things that are weird and different about AI compared to the internet or mobile or desktop computing and some of these other paradigms that have come up. So yeah, well, we should definitely talk about that.
Yeah, why maybe? Why are you uncertain? What are the potential paths here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all have to remember that when the smartphone comes out, the big opportunity is that you get a billion plus people that have to go buy the smartphone, and then they all want apps that are actually different than the apps that they use, in their internet browser, right? These apps have to be rewritten. They have to use push notifications. You need to swipe. They can use GPS. They can use the camera. They can do all these things that previously you couldn't do on your desktop. And so what that means is if you're like this big incumbent bulky Fortune 500, software company, historically, when you're talking about the browser, the desktop to the browser, I mean, really like mainframe to desktop, desktop to browser, browser to mobile, is that the whole suite of all the products have to be rewritten. And so just because you won the previous computing platform, because everybody has to go build, brand new applications, it means that a new set of companies can succeed. And what that means is because you have all that new real estate on your, in that platform, it means that you have, push notifications, whereas before you only had email. You have the App Store, whereas before maybe you worked on SEO. And so all the growth channels change significantly as well. Now, so the interesting thing with AI is that, you're kind of like, okay, so, we have this like really cool new set of technology, whether it's LLMs or 2D diffusion models or 3D diffusion models or music or whatever. But in the end, they actually still exist inside the paradigm of a mobile app or a website or whatever. So we kind of potentially haven't had the opportunity quite yet to say, oh wow, this is actually going to add new growth channels that didn't exist. Now, this might change over time. And this is why I say maybe Goggin and and you may have a theory about this too. But it could be that like, for example, I find myself using LLMs, in a substitute for Google these days. I probably ask Google 10% of the questions that that I used to ask it before. I ask the LLM 10 times more questions. So maybe over time, the fact that the LLMs may end up, with hyperlinked, results in the answers or ads on the sidebar or, whatever monstrosity we decide to come up with, will actually unlock new marketing channels. But it's so early. It's just hard to know what's actually going to happen here.
Yeah, I love looking at analogies for stuff like this. When mobile first came out, actually, it was not at all clear what the new system was going to be for growth. And if you remember, like Kleiner Perkins iFund, like almost all those companies disappeared. So even a year or two later, when mobile went from, just an iPhone to the App Store, you still had the first set of companies mostly not really work out. It wasn't until the second and third generation, 5 years into the iPhone coming out, or maybe even 7 or 8 years, that Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, those companies really became huge. And they totally leveraged the App Store for distribution, both directly and indirectly. They leveraged mobile as a downloadable software product as well as, the App Store as a distribution channel. But they were all, much later. So I think that, AI will likely have a similar timeline. I'm sort of waiting to see what's going to come from it. But I love that answer. Let's talk a little bit about like, you know, do you think, are you seeing anything right now? Like, have you seen anything that a growth person is using AI in a way? Someone's posting in the chat about agents. Like, have you seen a company, people have talked about AI SEO? Is there anything that starts to give us a hint of what might be in the future?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think uh, if AI is as general purpose as we think it will be, then it's going to affect everything. And there's sort of this, I've written about this before. There's this metaphor that's like, if you knew that, let's say that we were in the early 1800s and everyone rode horses everywhere. If you knew that the car was about to show up, it would be pretty straightforward for you to extrapolate that, oh, one day it means that you could, we're going to need gas stations, right? Because there's actually like, it turns out there's like horse watering holes and, you're going to have to give them hay and that kind of thing. So like, that's, that's something that like you can extrapolate. What's really hard is to extrapolate that also like Walmart is going to exist. Like you can build like something totally different, a retail experience is totally different that's dependent on the car, or that frankly, Los Angeles can exist, right? A city that's built around the car. And so I think when it comes to AI and marketing, there's a bunch of boring answers. And so I'll just rattle these off because like I think they're boring, right? So the boring answers are like, okay, well, we're gonna, when you want to make video ads, you're gonna be able to make them cheaper, right? Okay, when you want to write emails and you want to write email copy, for things, you want to design landing pages, you're going to be able to like do that easily. All that stuff is boring because it's sort of like existing things that we already know how to do, and we're just going to make them like cheaper. So that's great. Like, so let's do all those. Like, those are all products that are going to be built in the next 18 months or already out there. Great. So and same thing, Goggin, as you were saying, like using AI to write SEO copy. That's like straightforward. And there's people working on that, including one of my portfolio companies that's building a thing called Mega SEO. That's like working. There's a lot of them. Okay. So, but I think what's more interesting is like, if you're like Apple or you're Nike, you get access to the most creative people in the world. You have like a team of like 100 people working on any given, campaign of yours, right? Like, what if every small business had one of those? Like, what would that actually mean? And so I think what that actually means is not only is it that you can do these tactical things, but even from a more strategic level, you can go analyze the market, figure out like the product gaps in the market, figure out what brands is going to, resonate with people, build an entire creative brief, come up with an entire, 2-year strategy that involves like every single channel. And imagine being able to do all of that. And if you don't like any of it, you can just stop partway through and just say like, oh yeah, do this other thing, differently. And then when you're happy, you can just like hit execute and then, off it goes, right? And that's something that's much more like almost about the replacement of like labor and humans, in the flow that I think is really interesting. And then further, like a lot of things that we today don't even think of as possible. People are willing to, write text ads. That's easy. You can make banner ads. That's easy. Video, all of a sudden, a really nice video ad creative might be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands dollars per minute, for your video. But like, for example, Maven, for instance, would never build a AAA video game to promote Maven, right? It's not even something that would enter your line of thinking because it might cost you $50 million to like do something like that. And it's like kind of like, wow, what if all these things, like you could build a piece of software to promote Maven as a standalone, ad. You could, build a video game. You could, build a whole mobile app that's just, focused on, some special event. For this talk that we're doing right now with Goggin Mind itself, we could build, an entire full-fledged website that has all the resources and all the things, and we would build it, and then in 24 hours we would delete it because it's no big deal, right? I think what we'll start to see is this evolution of like what is the ad format from being text to photos to video, and then now to like many deep, rich, sort of complex things. And maybe I'll add one other kind of wild idea, kind of out there, which is I also love this thought of like what is really the distinction between marketing and sales, right? And why do we even need marketing? One of the reasons why we need marketing is because marketing allows you to broadcast to a very large number of people. And it's like, well, because you need a lot of humans to do that. I mean, it's like, but isn't it interesting that like, for example, Maven could spin up a sales team of, 100,000 humans and like individually, sell one-on-one to, lots of people in a very personalized and interactive way. Like that's not something that like we can do right now. Like you think of some companies, like if you're like, I don't know, BMW or something, like you sort of have this decentralized sales force of hundreds of thousands of people through all of your, things. But like, normal companies can't spin up, tens of thousands of humans to man a sales team, but like maybe that's going to be a technique in the future. And because those people are going to be able to call you and Zoom you and email you, and you're not going to be able to tell if they're human or not human, as a result of that, like that will become a legitimate way to actually interact with people. So anyway, let me stop there. But those are some of the like kind of second order, kinds of ideas that I've been kind of entertaining and playing around with. And I think those are maybe like more like 5 years away, but also it feels like it's all coming soon.
Yeah, I actually think that Well, you've touched on a few things. One is efficiencies on like radical efficiencies, like 10, 100x productivity efficiencies. And what will that enable for us? I think that's super interesting. The second thing I heard from you was that, you know, you might not do as much marketing because you might be able to do individualized sales. And a hybrid approach that I'm thinking about with takes into account both these things is what if you could customize your advertising in a much more targeted way, because each ad creative is that much easier to create. So now all of a sudden, like Maven has, you know, we probably have like 300 to 500 good courses on Maven. And we have, like I said, probably over 1,000 lightning lessons. It is really hard to market that because you're marketing, you know,
Yes.
essentially you need to market each one individually, and that's nearly no one's going to buy the bundle. Like no one says, oh, I just want to learn something, I go to Maven. No, they need to buy a specific item. And when buying a specific item, maybe AI will allow us to sell each specific item depending on whoever we're targeting to them. So already from a recommendation standpoint, that's been a huge unlock for us. Now all of our recommendation system are AI, and so when people get emails, the quality of those emails are way higher because we use you know, AI to figure out what is a course that this person is going to be interested in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and I think that's a sort of also a natural continuation of, all the, if you guys have been on X and following all the vibe coding, examples that people have been building all these video games and all these like really interesting kind of, mini applications is there's something like 8 million apps in the App Store right now. Like imagine if that were actually, not 80 million, not 800 million, but like 8 billion apps, or something like that. And you had to market all those things, sort of like you can sort of imagine that like the natural kind of bottleneck that exists today is that it's actually really hard to build products, and software engineers are expensive, and all this other stuff. So if you unblock all of that whole bottleneck, then I think there's a very real argument that the actual bottleneck then shifts from building software to actually marketing software, and it's actually the end user's attention that's the scarce thing, not the time it takes to code up one of these products. So I think that'll shift a lot as well in a really interesting way.
Yeah. One thing that you've talked about is how growth in 2025 might be an always be launching situation, and that people might be able to sort of, you know, just share, like do a lot more. I'm curious if you have any examples of companies that are doing this well, and any steps you can take as a company to introduce increased speed, because it's not easy to take an existing company that's not using AI too much and then transition them into like an always be launching situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that in a more mature marketing environment, I think one of the things that we're seeing is uh, social media as consumers move their attention towards social media, and because so much of social media is ultimately visual in nature. Any product that creates content that naturally is visual and gets shared on social media just gets this like natural growth kind of exhaust that comes off of what they do. And I think this is like, so to your question, Gagan, I think the easiest way to answer that is there's a reason why our timelines are filled with really cool creative output from AI tools, right? Like it's absolutely fascinating to me that in prior years I maybe would have like spent time with some of our very, very smart Stanford PhD CEOs, and they would have said like, oh, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, that's all bullshit. Like I don't spend any of my time on that. I'm just like busy like building. And then now they're like social media degens now. Like every time they have a new product feature that can do something cool, they're immediately hitting me on WhatsApp or email, being like, can you repost this? Can you repost this? And there's a reason for that, right? The reason is because um, in a world where the marketing channels are a little bit stale, but we have this general purpose technology that's so breakthrough, the novelty value is just really high, right? And we should just maybe talk about novelty effect a little bit. Whenever you have something that is highly novel, consumers and customers just, humans just respond to it. And, y'all remember like, 2 years ago when we were first starting to see some of the creations coming out of, Stability and Stable Diffusion and, Midjourney, we were so enamored by these like six-fingered, sort of, creations. And then now, like, who cares, right? Like nobody cares. Like now we want to see video. Now we want, the hedonistic treadmill is like continued, right? And so because of that, there's a strong novelty effect for anything that's new. And so for a lot of the AI founders and companies, and I can name, a bunch off the top of my head, they are all of a sudden very, very focused on social media because that's the place where you break the news for your highly novel, thing that has like a visual element to it. And so, for example, one of our favorite CEOs, Michael from Hedra, they're doing a whole bunch of interesting video, model work. And maybe I'll link it in chat. And one of the amazing things with it is like because each of their releases is so state of the art, because they're exhibiting new aspects of being able to interact with avatars and some of these things. What that means here, I'll put in their newest release, which is Hedra Studio and Character 3 as an example. What ends up happening is it's one of these ones where it just naturally goes viral because of the video and kind of visual nature of what they're doing.
Yeah, wow, that post has 707,000 views, which is like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean video I think in particular is like, so tightly integrated right now. It's like, I mean we're not only does X sort of boost you if you have video. I mean like in YouTube and Instagram and kind of the usual suspects, but like when you post video onto LinkedIn, it goes nuts. On LinkedIn, I mean that's like there's definitely something like there's sort of this theory of kind of this increasing vividness over time because when we first built the browser and email and the internet, it was all text. And Mark Andreessen, of course, added the image tag to the graphical browser. That's like what made Mosaic and ultimately Netscape work. And then we had video, like 20 years ago, and then now it just goes on and on and on. I think like ultimately, I think consumers just won't be satisfied until they have fully immersive, interactive kind of video content at all times in front of them.
I love it. The chat is popping off along with the Q&A section. Just a reminder, please find the Q&A session. Rachel's trying to explain how to get there. I know it's Zoom just doesn't make this that easy, but to put questions in there because that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to use most upvoted questions. So of course, upvote questions that you like. All right, from Alonzo. Is AI really that reliable nowadays? It seems that even the best AI fails close to 10%, which as you scale thousands, dozens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of mistakes, potential purchase reversions, etc. I see a trend nowadays to consider AI as an autopilot, but from my point of view, it's more of an extension tool rather than a replacement for teams' roles. What's your take?
Yeah. Yeah, this is such a fun debate because I think you have to ask kind of maybe a basic question, which is like how reliable are humans, the humans that the AI is creating, like if for those of you that have written code, how often do you write bug-free code, right? Or if you're writing a memo, like how often do you write a memo that is like perfect, like and the advantage of that, by the way, is that we humans have this thing called creativity, right? That allows us to take something that's right in front of us and then start to extrapolate it and try to kind of imagine crazy things happening, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of choose to imagine that the sort of non-deterministic nature of modern AI kind of aligns a little bit with that, which is if you like, I love that, for example, all the vibe coding people, not only do they vibe code their projects, but they actually tell Cursor or Replit Agent or whatever to actually write unit tests and integration tests as they go, knowing that defensively, like the vibe coding mechanics are actually like, it's almost like you're dealing with like a junior software engineer, right, who's like not very good. And so you have to actually do everything defensively. And so I think it's I think I think all of this will improve over time, but I also just find it very interesting that, you know, the LLMs today kind of are somewhat unreliable, slightly unreliable in the same way that humans are unreliable. And, you know, for those of you that, you know, hang out with your friends and family, that where one of them always cites facts that aren't true, and you have to Google fact check them constantly. We all know how we all have that person in our life. You know, it's kind of like that. I think that's okay. And I think we'll build systems that both improve those things as well as kind of act defensively against it.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm actually a little bit more on the other side where I feel like I've so far been able to use it really effectively um as a partner to things that I'm doing. So a lot of my LinkedIn posts nowadays are edited by AI. They're rarely ever written by AI because I find that if it writes it, the quality is it's obvious that it's written by and the quality is just not as good. So obviously I'm like, I would consider myself to be a decent writer. Maybe that's your point, is like for the average person, it's not as good. But I will say there's like like even when I'm reading LinkedIn, like we can tell like when people are writing via AI, at least on my team. Um, and so I do think that there's a challenge here. The flip side, though, is that there's so many productivity related things where there is no need to get everything accurate and for the writing quality to be super high. And those are the areas that we've been using it at Maven.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think anybody that's at the top of their field, you're going to naturally be critical not only of the output, you know, from these AI models, but you're going to be really critical about other humans' output as well. You know, that's sort of like the whole, you know, Ira Glass observation that skill and your taste are fundamentally different things. And when you're first getting started, your taste is much higher than your skill. And so you're constantly frustrated because even though your skill's going up, your taste is also going up. And it takes, you know, whatever, 10, 15 plus years for maybe the two lines to actually cross each other, and that you can actually create things that you're happy with. And so for those of you that are in these kinds of creative fields, I think the natural thing is that we also, you know, are going to evaluate AI in the same way. And so, yeah, if you're top 1%, you're going to feel like the output is shit, but that's because you think everyone's output is shit. Only yours is good. Or and maybe not even, maybe that's not even true, right? And so as a result of that, I think you know, the most interesting things are exactly your point, Goggin, things that people are willing to already outsource today. I think that's, by the way, one of the reasons why a lot of the work that we're seeing outsourced initially, you know, sort of sorry, that are the AI tools and products that have some of the highest traction are some of the things that are commonly outsourced by companies, right? Customer service, you know, for example, like we have a great company called Decagon that, you know, is focused on customer service. And, you know, when I know I forget what the number was at, you know, don't know what the number was at Lyft, but, you know, at Uber, we had, you know, 60, 70,000 people in the Philippines literally just doing tickets so that, you know, when you have like people, you know, where their Uber Eats order was messed up, you know, they would submit something and then somebody in the Philippines would like type that in. Like those are the kinds of things that, you know, will probably go to LLMs earlier rather than later. And same with like, you know, in gaming and you know, in entertainment, there's like art outsourcing, you know, that's a thing. You know, a lot of like the back office for like accounting firms and things like that, you know, are often, you know, might go to AI. And so I think a lot of that, it's a sort of routine work is what's going to be, you know, is what's going to be augmented first. And in fact, there's a really interesting 2x2 that I've seen, which is like, is your work routine or is it extremely novel? So that's kind of like one axis. And then the other axis is your work internal facing, you know, sort of solo, or is it people facing? Okay. And if your job is a human facing, highly novel kind of role, then like that, those are naturally going to be the hardest to supplant with AI, or you know, those are the things that are most likely to be just augmented by AI, but you keep a human in the loop. Now, if the kind of work that you're doing is routine and it's also not human facing, then the question becomes, okay, if that gets automated, what's the next level of abstraction that you have to reskill yourself to in order for this to, you know, in order for this to all work? So yeah, that's kind of a quick and easy way to think of it.
I love it. All right, we got a question from Hussein. I think people want a few specifics, so if you can come up with them, great. But if we're not there yet, definitely let me know. Let me know, which is what's the most effective AI-driven growth hack you've recently seen in consumer apps?
AI driven growth hack. Um, I think I don't have a great example, to be honest. I mean, I think a lot of it is novelty oriented right now, is what's happening because most of the products that are successful in AI are ultimately prosumer and B2B, just because of the cost structure. There's APIs that kind of go under. I mean, the annoying things that I'm sure are working is I'm sure that there's a lot of content that's being generated, just like emails and SEO content and that kind of thing that is being written by LLMs. I think there's certainly that happening. And that's maybe like the very beginning of it. And we see like tons and tons of products that are being, built for every aspect of, like marketing and advertising. But there's nothing that I would actually put like over the top as like, I think is like great. I don't know, God, do you have one on your
No,
side that
my
you like?
answer is actually that I don't think today I've heard of an AI growth hack other than the AI SEO growth hack, which I think is a little skeptical, but it could work. But the way that I would think about this is today, that's not how we're not at the era of AI yet, where there are AI driven growth hacks. And if there are, they're very, very nascent. We're in the era right now where AI itself is allowing us to build products that are naturally going viral. So we're on the existing rails. The existing rails are social media. And social media is so you can use AI to increase your output on social media or to create things like video or create things like a reply bot or something that's really going to be successful on social. However, I don't know that there's sort of like an AI native um, growth hack that I've seen yet. And I think that that's actually maybe a couple years away, honestly.
Yeah.
That's my instinct on
Yeah,
it.
I think we're just early. I think we're just early. We're gonna see it all, but we're just early.
Yeah. I think we are having a bit of a general AI conversation. So I want to ask this, which is like, is there to people who are concerned of the losing of jobs or the transitioning of the workforce in this world, what do you say to them? What do you say, hey, 100,000 people are going to lose their jobs because we don't need any more of these jobs because of AI. Like, what do you think is actually going to happen?
Yeah, it's something I've tried to reason with as far as like you know if we were to all go back and we were living in the early 1800s and we knew that the industrial revolution was coming, like how would we think about it? And by the way, it's interesting because for example, for the industrial revolution, it was something like a 100+ year transition. It wasn't like snap, we invent the steam engine and then everything, everything changes, right? It sort of was like, you invented some of these like kind of minor, things, and then you had to invent electricity, and then it's like, oh, by the way, we have factories now, and by the way, the factories can build new things, and so you kind of had this like long continuation of a bunch of things, and I think ultimately you have to be excited that if you're excited about what's happened in uh, like the industrial revolution, that the fact that we can have everything that we have today and all the abundance that we have today, and we're not in subsistence agricultural lifestyle. I think it's all of those same reasons why you would be excited about technological progress, like in general. And so, of course, this certainly means that the next generation of people are going to have new and different jobs. By the way, many of you might know this, but in the year 1900, something like over 50%, I think it might even be like 60 or 70%, like a very high percentage of the United States, somebody can fact check me, a very high percentage of the United States actually worked in agriculture. And so, and now that number is like, under 10%. And I think there's a very good reason. I think we should all be glad that we're not all working in agriculture, right now. So I think a lot of the things that are, the roles are all going to change. I think it's and further, it's also something that just having computers and having the internet has even, changed a lot of jobs, this whole concept of a laptop job. So, I mean, I won't, like, I think anybody that claims that things are going to be the same is, like, I don't think you can say that, but I think you have to be optimistic about what technology is going to ultimately, bring us. So at the same time, like, look, all of us that are kind of, I expect to have another couple, decades in my career, and like, we all got to like keep up and, learn and be open-minded and, use all these tools and learn as much as, as we can, and not rest on our prior career and like the prior jobs that we had, because everything's going to change. So I think that's just sort of a natural outcome all about this. So yeah,
Yeah,
okay. So someone just posted this: 40% of U.S. workforce working in agriculture in 1900, and then today it's 1%. So yeah, that's kind of the, that's kind of one way to think about it.
yeah, I think we overestimate, or today we are overestimating how fast this will happen. It is not a tomorrow thing. There are not like, tens of thousands of jobs, or hundreds of thousands, I should say, jobs that are being cut tomorrow. It's going to take time for all of this to trickle through the economy. Like, as an example, my wife works in a sector with the government, and she works on immigration. To this day, they are still mailing 500-page immigration documents to the USCIS, who then, receives them. So it will take time for all of the jobs, quote unquote, to actually transition to the new technology. But there will be changes, and the people who are in this room are the people who need to move forward into a new era of time, so that the people who can't move can continue to have the jobs that are a little bit older school. So like, actually, we need to transition a certain set of the population into new AI oriented jobs, so that the existing people who are not going to transition still have opportunities themselves. And I think that's like an interesting thing. So it's incumbent upon you to actually like move things forward and create new opportunities for the group of people who want to follow that. So I think I'm personally like definitely aware that this is going to be a problem, but also a little bit more optimistic than some of the people in the chat. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and one of the funny questions, I mean, I love asking, a lot of parents that are in tech, that have kids. I often ask them like, hey, have you, have you come to, really believe in kind of where AI is going to go? And of course, they always, just seeing all the change, of course they do. And one of the questions I always ask is like, how is the advice that you're giving your kids different, like than a couple of years ago? Whether it's like work or life or, career or whatever. And it's such a, I mean, I think we're just all grappling with, with that question of like how to even give guidance to the next generation as well. So no, it's this is like a super interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, we could talk about it a lot, but I want to come back to growth a little bit. So Abhishek asks, fundamentally, growth comes from more people buying more things or buying them differently, which then leads to spending more time on new AI-fied platforms. As AI replaces labor, two scenarios will play out. We'll be super productive and it'll drive more consumption, or we won't have a job. Do you see organic growth of more people spending more time than ever? So like, because you don't have a job, you're then going to have more time to do things. And
Yeah.
is there a growth strategy that solves this sort of like time abundance challenge that people might run into, or do you think that's kind of
Yeah.
a false comparison here?
No, I love this question because it's kind of like, what happens if we all have too much time to do stuff that we want to do? Like, what's going to happen? And it's like, yeah, that's what is going to happen. Like, that sounds great. Yeah, I mean, this is where we're all going to become, Maven creators and Substack writers. Obviously, that's the natural conclusion, to all of this. But no, I mean, I think like, one of the really interesting observations I was making about like content creation on the internet is that naturally content creation, lends itself towards kids right now. And so if you look at like, where's all the, who's making all the video, who's making all the, photos, who's taking all the photos, and ultimately like who's going to be writing all the code in the future, I'm very sure it's going to be young people. And so the idea of having like youth culture in software and building software, I think is like inevitable because of the fact that they're the ones that are time rich. Now, if it turns out that like we're all time rich, then like I think that's really interesting because you know, I think that's where you know, then you have to ask the question like, okay, well, you know, are there things that, you know, we'll just all want to do simply because of the fact that we just intrinsically enjoy them. And so, you know, I do a lot of writing. It's not my job. It's like maybe part of my job now, but like I've always just enjoyed it as like a pursuit unto itself. And so, you know, maybe we'll see a lot of that. And then it'll turn out that some of those things have commercial capability. There may be things that, you know, you know, are products that people care about that where they place a huge emphasis on the idea that they're actually human made, you know, they're sort of handmade. The same way that like if a suit is sort of like hand tailored for you, you kind of think it's more special than something that was made in a factory. And so like, are we gonna have maybe the same way that, you know, like, and there's a philosopher named Nick Bostrom who wrote Superintelligence, and then he has a new book called Deep Utopia where he talks about a bunch of these concepts, you know, where whether it's like you know, a priest, or it's like a spouse, or you know, maybe it's like an artist, or you know, there's kind of these things where you might place a huge premium on the idea that it's actually human interacting with you rather than you know, AI. And it may be that there's a huge amount of, you know, kind of we'll find kind of a new economic layer that sort of exists you know, there as well. And then, you know, and then there's, you know, one of the arguments he makes that I thought that was very interesting is Bostrom has also talked about, you know, I think the thing that a lot of folks are concerned about is what if 100% of human capability can be done via AI, right? I think that's one where, you know, you kind of have to like try to wrap your mind around that. I think more likely the answer will be like, well, maybe 60% will be done by AI or 80% will be done by AI. And then that gap of that 20 to 40% of that stuff that can only be done by humans, I think will explode in value, right? So I think it's very interesting to sort of speculate as to like what those things are, while simultaneously everything else gets insanely cheap, right? So if you're in the world where you are kind of in that, like you have those skills that sit in that 20%, only humans can do it, AI can't do it, and also everything else becomes insanely cheap because of, you know, robots and automation and everything else. Like for that, if you have that skill, or you can train people to have those skills, like that might be like an incredible place to live, right? So that might be the other way to think from a career standpoint.
Yeah, speaking of training people to learn these skills, for those of you who don't know, Maven has like probably 50 to 100 of the best AI courses on the planet. I really believe that, taught by some great instructors who really know their stuff and are on the bleeding edge. So I hope some of you check that out. Carissa asked a really good question because it takes in a different direction that I think people will want, which is, Andrew, how do you approach long-term road mapping when in a landscape dominated by short-term execution mindsets like influencers or growth hacking? How's your philosophy on business sustainability and vision evolved as, you know, you've become more, I mean, as a VC, you kind of become like more abstracted from it. I'd love to hear
Yeah,
that question.
yeah. Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest, you know, challenges that we often are faced with is we end up meeting a startup, and the startup has this insane, you know, oh my God, in the last 3 weeks in the App Store, it's been number one, you know, it just is like grown insanely fast. Um, and we have to decide like, should we invest in this? You know, is this real or not? Right? Is sort of a question, right? And that's one flavor. And let me give you the total opposite flavor. The other opposite flavor is you have a product that isn't growing that well. It's maybe like kind of the top line is just kind of, you know, bumping along. Maybe it's growing like 50% a year or something like that. But you look at the retention and you're like, oh man, the retention is incredible. Like anybody that uses the product, they just stick right away. And you kind of have to figure out like between those two, you know, which one, you know, are you into? And I think that leads to an answer to your question, Gavin, which is, I think, you know, in the end, what I've found is that everything that we do around growth and marketing amplifies a core, you know, value prop that already exists. And if you have a really strong value prop. I mean, the version of this that I use is like, if you have a little teeny tiny diamond and you can like put a big magnifying glass on it, then you get a big diamond, right? Like, and that's what we all want. But if you have like a little tiny piece of shit product and then you put a magnifying glass on it, okay, you don't like the results of that, right? And so I think that's kind of the role of marketing and growth, and that's why all of us that have been working in the industry know how much easier it is to market something that has really really strong product market fit. And so in many ways, I'm always attracted to the products that have like great retention but maybe don't have an amazing growth curve yet. If I can think of the kinds of growth, kind of the growth ideas that kind of bring them there, I would tend to rather work on that problem versus a problem that looks like it's growing really fast, but the reason why it's growing is because it's just acquiring a lot of users, and then people churn out, and then you're trying to acquire even more users in order for the whole thing to keep going. It kind of looks like a kind of a wildfire where sort of you just get this big circle and it's kind of burning, and then the middle kind of gets burned out. It's like you can only sustain that for so long before the whole thing falls apart, and you kind of run out of people in the market. So I do think that like that's really important. And then I think for the repertoire of everything that we work on, that there's a natural kind of like nature versus nurture to these things. It turns out that travel products are low frequency, and because they're low frequency, they kind of have to be like SEO, SEM, affiliate, partnerships, like that kind of thing. Products that are really high frequency, like communication products, struggle to monetize, but they can grow virally. And so what ends up happening is you kind of need to know the exact playbook that kind of matches the kind of product that you're working with, and go deep kind of within that. So these days, like when I'm evaluating products, like I want to see that core like really really good retention, and then I want the founders and kind of growth people to be able to have enough expertise about which general direction to go, because they're reasoning using kind of related products, kind of within all that.
And this is where we get to the point where we talk about why AI isn't going to just replace everything, which is that, as you just heard, Andrew just gave earned wisdom of 10 plus years of working that applies to the AI world and applied to the mobile world and applied to the web world before it, essentially, right? Which is
Yes.
you.
But Gaga, now this data is going to get indexed, and it's going to be in the model. So now it'll be in there.
Absolutely. By the way, I think you can get the earned wisdom way faster, and there's way more of it today than there was 20 years ago. So I agree, but there's still a judgment associated with, I have a certain type of user. I need to build a marketing system that is really resonant with that user. And so no matter what AI growth hack is out there, it's not going to work for every company. It's going to work for whichever company, each growth hack will work for a different company depending on what type of user they have, what frequency of behavior they have, what type of retention they have. So I thought I'd just double down on that comment that you made. We're 5 minutes past, Andrew. I don't know if you want to take one more question and then wrap, but I think this has been really powerful. There's a bunch of people who are like saying really amazing things in the chat. So thank you everyone for your attention so far. And Andrew, you have any final parting words here?
Yeah, look, I think part of what you're hearing in the conversation today is there isn't a time that I've been more excited to be in tech since we knew that mobile was going to be real, kind of in like that 2009 kind of time. It kind of feels like that, right? It's like amazing that there's so many people working on really interesting products. You're seeing crazy growth rates. I mean, you guys have seen like Cursor went from 0 to 100 million ARR in under a year, and we're just seeing like incredible uptick. And I think what that means is like this is like if you're in the growth and marketing profession, you're going to see a huge impact to everything that you can do. I'm just like really bullish and optimistic about all of it. And so so yeah, I appreciate Goggin, you and the Maven team having me. I know that the next couple of years are going to be super super interesting with all the tools and products out there. So I think it's great to have a company like Maven that's going to go and like aggregate a lot of that knowledge and put it out there. So thanks again for having us.
Of course. Thanks, Andrew. Maybe Rachel can put his Substack one more time in the chat. And thank you everyone for all your time today. And the engagement's been amazing and it gave us a lot of energy. So thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, everyone.